Okay, welcome to Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting for 9 a.m. Wednesday, September 13th, 2023. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me.
Flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is citizen input. Mr. Carl Shoemaker has asked to speak. Thank you for joining us.
I want to talk about short-term rentals in the unincorporated part of Deschutes County, which is, I understand, is under consideration. I assume they'll be mostly tourists that'll be staying at them. So these tourists, of course, come into downtown Bend and they walk around and they come across the real estate agencies and those with the pictures. And so they say, well, I can afford that place. I'll go talk to the agent. So I assume the agent takes them out to show them the place and shows them all the amenities and how great it is to live there, and tells them how great it is to live in Bend. But it's what they don't tell that is important. It's expensive to live in Bend, Oregon, in Deschutes County, in fact, because rents are expensive up in Redmond too. They find out that Hayden Homes is allowed to play music at 80 dBs, 17 times louder than any other venues are allowed to play. 5 dBs. They find out that the real estate agent did not tell them about how sometimes the snow gets really winter. And you will have accidents if you don't have proper snow tires or a four-wheel drive vehicle. They don't tell people how expensive it is to heat their homes in winter. They don't tell people how gas prices rise during tourist season. They don't tell them other problems that will occur over time as they live in Bend, or about air conditioning in the summer. And this has been allowed to go on and will be allowed to go on for as long as I expect it will be allowed to go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for citizen input today? Is there anyone online? A raised hand feature. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda.
So move.
Second. And just acknowledging item number 2, it just had a slight word change on the agenda item referring to budget impacts. Yeah, so I think we all got that memo. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chen? Yes. And chair votes yes. Thank you very much. Item number 5, enterprise zone abatement extension for BaseX. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Eric Kropp, Deputy County Administrator, joined by Steve Curley. Go ahead if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, Commissioners. Steve Curley, Director for Redmond Economic Development at EDCO.
The ask today is the signature of an agreement to extend the BaseX Economic Development Enterprise Zone Agreement, and Steve will walk us through the draft agreement.
Yeah, great. So BaseX Solutions, which is on the south end of Redmond. I'm sure you're all familiar with them. They manufacture clean room and HVA systems. They are doing an addition on the north end of their building. It's about a 35,000 square foot weld shop. It's about a $20 million investment between the building and equipment that they will be adding. This is the third enterprise zone abatement that they have done. They have 2 that are already in process. One when they converted that old Walmart building into their factory, and then an expansion that actually just wrapped up last year, which was fairly significant. They continue to grow, and they acquired a small piece of property just on the north end, which is allowed for this newest expansion. Under the enterprise zone program, they would qualify for a 3-year abatement, but we are asking for a 5-year abatement under the conditions of the enterprise zone agreement, that the jobs are at 150%, compensation for those jobs are 150% of Deschutes County average median wage, which is just around 85,000. Over half of the jobs that they will be adding, which is 35 jobs, are over that amount. So they qualify for 2 years of an extended abatement, making it a 5-year abatement. So that is the ask here. And just one more piece of note is the Greater Redmond Area Enterprise Zone requires approval from the Redmond City Council, the sister city council, as well as the commission. And the first 2 approvals are completed.
Great. Well, and thank you for putting the previous agreements in here. I'm seeing the previous mayor and previous commissioners signing, and Commissioner Dare signed in 2020. So it's exciting history here, watching this growth happen and those jobs. It's just amazing seeing that many jobs available in these times.
You know, that really
Any
exciting
questions?
opportunity to support, one of the bright stars of economic development in our community.
Is there any discussion or motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that we have chair signature of document number 2023-843, the Greater Redmond Area Zone Extended Abatement Agreement for Basics.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I do see one of the original owners in Sisters Coffee quite a bit. So, yeah, it's just,
Still happening.
yeah, I mean, he still goes to work really early.
Very
Pretty
involved in the
exciting.
community.
Okay, with that, I call him for the vote. Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Congratulations and thank you. I'll get that signed today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for also serving on the Fair Board, Steve.
Thank you. Look forward to our meeting coming up next month.
Item number 6, Senate Bill 80, wildfire hazard mapping discussion.
Hello, good morning, Commissioners. Will Groves, your planning manager for the record. I've got some materials I'm going to be handing out to you this morning.
Oh, thanks.
Great.
Different maps.
Mm,
Good morning, Board. So I'm here today to talk to you about the Senate Bill 80 wildfire hazard risk mapping update. I want to give you here today, of course, with Kevin Moriarty, our county forester. We'll be providing some comments later in this presentation. A little bit of background. So previously, Senate Bill 762 was a wildfire risk mapping effort intended to lead to fire construction hardening requirements and defensible space requirements for structures that were both in the wildland urban interface and mapped as high hazard in Oregon. And as you remember, those initial maps were recalled in the face of significant public concern about the rollout of those maps and the quality of the data. So what's happening now? Oregon State University and the Oregon Department of Forestry have made efforts to revise the map based on feedback and are now rolling out draft maps to solicit public responses. We're here today ahead of a meeting on September 21st in Klamath Falls. That's going to follow the regular Association of Oregon Counties meeting to receive initial county feedback on the new maps. So these new maps have a multi-stage rollout, including an initial rollout on September 21st to local governments. And then there'll be public rollouts again with a final opportunity for governments to interact with local governments to interact with ODF and OSU on these maps. CDD had just received these drafted map layers, and I want to really give a big shout out to our team in IT who have produced these maps that are before you today and we'll discuss shortly. We've received layers from the state and we've used that to combine with our information available in our existing GIS layers to produce some preliminary information. So I want to take a moment to talk you through these maps that we produced today. I've got a county-wide map of these new maps up on the wall there, and it's also the first map in your packet. And you're going to notice some changes from the previous maps. Most distinctly is that the previous risk map had 5 levels of classification of hazard, and this one has collapsed that to 3: low, moderate, and high. And you can see those mapped throughout the county under the current draft map. In addition, there are wildland urban interfaces that are shaded areas on that map. That's your WUI, as well as you can see urban growth boundaries and highways shown on that map. Of course, at that level, it's pretty difficult to see what's going on with the map. And so I just want to note that we produced inset detail maps for the Bend area, the Lapine area, the Redmond area, the Sisters area, as well as the Sun River area. So we've got some zoom maps there for you to zoom in a little bit.
So just a little bit of the technology. So when we say we have a new layer,
Mhm.
is this going to be, this is plugged into the county dial system? It's a layer that can be turned on and off, or it will be at some point?
At some point, when we receive final maps, these will be incorporated in our local dial system. At this point, what we did is what we had really received from the state was a kind of an 8.5 by 11 map that looked a little bit like that.
Mm.
And so it was zoomed out so far as to have limited use in terms of getting your feedback today. And because we received the data layers of the WUI and the hazard areas, we were able to take that into our system and mesh that with resources that we have to produce zoomed in maps and produce some tabular data, which is pretty interesting. I'm going to walk you through that real quick. So in addition to the maps, you've got some tables there. And I'm going to jump right to table 2, which is the total high hazard mapping properties within the WUI and outside of UGB. So those are things in county jurisdiction. Total of 21,000 properties roughly across 85,000 acres. Something that's interesting to note is at this point, the map is not homogenized per property. So the previous mapping effort would have, if you had a large property, you would receive one hazard classification on your property that was consistent through that. And it's our understanding that what they were doing was they were taking the kind of underlying data map, and to the extent your property was predominantly one type of hazard, the entire property was declared that type of hazard. And we anticipate that that'll be the case again. So as we move forward through tables 3 through 5, what we've done is we've taken the map that the data that we've received and smoothed it per property so that each property is represented by its predominant classification. And in table 3, you can see that results in 17,000 properties that predominantly high hazard mapped and about 66,000 acres that are affected. Table 4 breaks out the zoning of those properties, and those are predominantly zoned rural residential, followed by multiple use agricultural 10, exclusive farm use, those UAR 10 Title 19 lands that are adjacent to the city of Bend, with the forest use rounding out the last major category of zoning. But of course, there's a variety of other zones and properties that are affected. Table 5 there shows you that there are some public properties affected by that. But they're relatively limited in scope compared to the ones that are in private ownership.
Well, why do the public properties lists have negative acreage numbers?
I think that there was, we were working on this up to yesterday, and I think the notion is that to the extent that there were tallies of acres, these were deducted from other acreage tallies somewhere in there, and they're just holding a negative value. So, yeah, just.
I think it's an approximation.
Oh, that's a tilde. Yes, it's an approximation.
Progressive lenses.
Time for new contacts for me as well. So that's the information that we've got here today. I apologize for getting it to you here at the last minute. We processed it very quickly once we received this information. This is, of course, the purpose of the meeting today is to solicit any concerns or feedback that you have ahead of the September 21st meeting in Klamath Falls. Oregon State University and Oregon Department of Forestry have requested, any feedback that we have in advance of that meeting. They'd love an opportunity to get in front of that, do any necessary research, help to provide them responses and discussions about concerns or questions that you might have. Before we jump right into that, of course, I've got Kevin here today with us, and I wanted to provide an opportunity. Certainly, he's here to participate in the answering of any questions you have. I wanted to make a space for him if he had any initial feedback or concerns about the map or any discussion before we jumped into documenting commissioner concerns and feedback.
Yeah, for the record, Kevin Moriarty, County Forester. Yeah, I've been working with Will on this. As far as, looking at the spatial layer, from a really high scale, some of the things that stand out is there's significant areas that are ranked moderate in areas that are adjacent to wildland fuels, notably Deschutes River Woods, Sun River, kind of the area just south of Sun River, and some areas in West Bend.
Kevin, you just said they're ranked moderate.
Yes, they're ranked.
Okay, so my friend, I just had lunch with her yesterday, lives in Deschutes River Woods, and she had a very challenging time getting new insurance on their home. She had to go through a lot of hoops and finally did get coverage. So, yeah, I know we're saying this isn't going to be related to insurance, but the insurance industry is already ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have their own data and their own maps and their own models. And that's what they're using to make coverage decisions and set rates.
Yeah, I think just holistically speaking, the more the concern isn't not necessarily that those areas were ranked moderate, but areas with similar conditions and similar risk were ranked high. Was probably more the concern. It doesn't seem to have some continuity across the landscape as far as what was ranked moderate and what was ranked high in relation to adjacency to wildland fuels or the existing conditions. The other concern that I have, and maybe this is just more smoothing, but on a HOA or neighborhood association level, there are several communities that are split between high and moderate. And so if you're managed at an HOA level, you're going to have certain tax lots that would be ranked high and certain that would be ranked moderate that could cause issues within a neighborhood association or an HOA. And then also areas that are ranked low, like Bend, I would personally probably rank that moderate. I don't know if you really can say there's really any low fire risk in Central Oregon at this point, but that's just my personal opinion. I guess it's probably moving forward, what would happen with this map? Is there ways to smooth it out? Do we take it as it stands right now, or, what kind of adjustments would need to be done? Again, my biggest concerns are probably the areas ranked moderate that with areas adjacent to it are ranked high, and there doesn't seem to be any discernible difference in vegetation or location between those two.
So a couple thoughts. Who's going to be with us next week down in Klamath Falls, staff wise? Are you going to be there?
Myself, yes,
Yep.
I will be there.
Anybody else from community development? Just because it'll be a kind of a group of people with the knowledge base from Deschutes County at a table.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. Of course, if you wanted someone from CDD, we could be there. I thought, and again, credit to Will and his team for taking what was initially provided to us as very coarse information. We were able to engage through our AOC the spatial data that has allowed us to produce the maps for you today. So while CDD could certainly attend the meeting at the Running Y in Klamath Falls on the 21st, I thought our kind of utility for the board, with all due respect to Kevin Moriarty, our county forester, was to give you this data disaggregating it in the way that we have. And of course, if you would like us to customize this information in other ways, we can certainly do that for you by the 21st, but I'm not sure what, besides just being there as a in unison, I'm not sure what more CDD could offer in terms of how the board wants to engage the state agency officials. So
Yep.
that's why there was such a premium on getting these maps to you as soon as possible. But again, if you would like CDD there, myself or a planner could attend, but I wanted to. This was where I thought
Yep.
Our biggest bang for the buck was as a department was.
And this is just our moment to think it through a little
Yeah.
bit. Is there
Perfect.
somebody else that could or should be there at the table?
I think it's important for the board to determine what we want to say about this mapping effort.
Mhm.
And then once we know what we want to say, we can determine whether it's appropriate to ask staff to come and help deliver that information or not.
Yeah, and that's fine. So another thought, what about Firewise communities? Do we have those like on a layer also? Do we document Firewise communities in a footprint?
We have a layer, but it's not a complete layer. We don't have all 63 fire res communities mapped out.
So I'm just thinking if we have HOAs that have gone through a Firewise effort that are in that split situation, we may be able to make a advocacy for, either bring it all in or take it all out, because it is Firewise, which we'd probably lean to ask it out. But,
Could you get that done by Wednesday? No, I mean, really, it's so important in today's world when my friend's insurance just tripled. Okay, it just tripled.
Yeah.
So these people have gone to extreme efforts in order to become, aren't we almost when they're all past up to 70? I mean, this is really important. And this is like a public statement that these communities should be recognized for all the work that they've done. I think it's incredibly, incredibly important. It's only going to get worse with insurance.
It's really important for us to recognize what these maps do and what they don't do and how what the potential use of the maps will be. The potential use of these maps is not going to be for setting insurance rates. The potential use of these maps is going to be to identify areas where people need to take measures to make their homes more resilient, where they could be supported in doing fuels reduction work, home hardening work, with technical assistance or subsidies. And that is actually an argument in favor of identifying more area as high hazard. Because these maps are not for insurance purposes. Again, the insurance companies have their own models, their own data. They have years and years of claim and loss data, and they are not making their decisions based on these maps. They might use these maps for political cover, to do things that they are planning to do anyway, but they are not making rate decisions and coverage decisions based on these maps.
If I may, Chairman and Commissioners, just to kind of prepare you for the 21st meeting on the 21st with the state agency representatives, I had quite a professional, albeit spirited conversation with the Department of Forestry and with Oregon State University representatives just to get the spatial data, which of course they ultimately provided. I think similar to 2021 with Senate Bill 762, I think the board should be prepared that the state is going to respond that Senate Bill 762 dictates the layers and the data that inform wildfire risk. And so while the board may want to have Firewise community layers and other localized information that further tells our story about resiliency, my educated guess is that the state's going to acknowledge that, but then turn right back to the two bills and say, that's not something that we can take into consideration to assess wildfire vulnerability. I'm not trying to dismiss how
Yep.
important that data is and other information that tells the story of how Deschutes County, my professional opinion, has been a leader over the last several decades to make Deschutes County as resilient as possible to wildfire. But the state agency representatives were quite assertive in the conversation that I was having, just to say, we want the spatial data so we can disaggregate in a way that shows ownership and zoning, and so the board, and we can break it out into sub areas so the board has a better understanding of the implications of this mapping effort in our backyard. So I offer that to you just to prepare you for what I think the tenor of that conversation could look like.
And if I could also just say, we absolutely want that information, Firewise communities, we want detailed information about where defensible space work has been done and the place for that work. And, the place to bring that forward in my mind is after these maps have been released and are playing their regulatory role, and before the insurance companies start to consider how they're going to cover people. So the target of that information is the insurance industry. We want to acknowledge the hazard that we have in our community. And then we want to say, and look at what all these people have done to mitigate that hazard. And that is why you should give them lower rates or continue to extend coverage in this area. And Senate Bill, I can't remember if it's 80 or 82 specifically does that. It says, it directs the insurance industry to provide essentially discounts for work that people have done. But that doesn't, that's after that, all that basically trying to get the insurance industry to recognize what people have done. That happens after the maps.
So back to the beginning here. So when there's a map in place, hardening requirements, is that applied to new construction, or would we ever take an existing structure and say, okay, you need to do this to your existing structure? Is there clarity on that?
It applies to new structures. Do you know to what extent it applies to residential additions or?
Yeah, I believe I do.
Thank you.
My understanding is when the maps are acknowledged,
Mhm.
that if you're in the wildland urban interface and are in a high classification, any residential or accessory structures are subject to fire hardening and of course defensible space. I believe if you're
New construction.
new construction, it's not retroactive, but if you do an addition, I think it triggers it.
What about like a major remodel of the existing structure?
Calling that, I think the answer would likely be yes. I mean, those are excellent questions that the
Yeah.
board could seek further
We'll ask,
clarity
yep.
from the experts on the 21st.
So
Well,
then-
remodel being exterior only,
Mhm,
if any
mhm,
expansion would be. right?
Correct. Interior, I don't think it would apply.
Right, yeah.
Interesting.
But if you're adding square footage to the house,
I think
It-
that's-
right?
So then it gets to defensible space requirements, which could be for any and every property. What is that? Do we have a feel for what that looks like? Somebody that, because I've seen that scenario where, a neighborhood that's not working towards Firewise, but there's some community folks doing some cleanup. They always say, okay, well, those guys need to clean up too. Is this going to work towards that? Is there a state requirement that a neighborhood in a WUI high area required for defensible space?
And I want to
We,
acknowledge
I
today,
will be required to do defensible space.
Yeah, so that's the scenario that's going to be very tangible for people.
and I want to apologize today. We have Kyle Collins, who is our expert on this, is out and I'm pinch hitting, and appreciate
Not a
your
problem.
patience as the rest of the team. We in fact do have these answers in-house. We just don't have them in our heads.
But yeah, that defensible space scenario will probably be the one that I'd like to learn about, because I mean, as I say, a lot of rural neighborhoods, and I know a lot of folks, and we get the call once in a while, I went and cleaned up my whole property. Now those guys need to. Same scenario we've been in for decades. I mean, it's not anything different, but what would change here by requirements or expectations or resources? So
And
we
if
can learn
Dave
about
wants to
that.
Follow up on this.
Yep.
Thank you. I wanted to, if I may, note that this is a little, I'm your floodplain manager as well, and wanted to note that this is similar to the floodplain issue in that, those maps always have limited accuracy, and there's a choice between, where people will be compelled to take physical precautions against a hazard versus where, they're not required to. And certainly the mapping has limitations. There are people who, under the current mapping in the floodplain, are compelled to take physical precautions when in fact the risk is relatively lower than it might be on a neighbor's property who might be mapped in error in the opposite way. So, these maps are never perfect. Certainly everyone in the county is subject to some sort of fire hazard. And there's definitely people who would benefit significantly from taking these physical precautions in terms of defensible space and construction requirements. So I think there'll be significant public debate about the fine-grained effect of the map. But it's important to see, pun intended, the forest for the trees here and recognize that, at least at the statewide level, it's an important goal to have people be on alert and potentially mandated to take precautions where they're subject to real hazard. And it can be difficult to get that mapping at a property level.
Are these maps available for public review now?
So what we have right now are the maps that you see. They will be uploaded as part of the board packet ultimately when they're consolidated by Brenda, and anyone can contact me, will.groves@deschutes.org, and I can send an email copy for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, because as I say, this is the Board of Commissioners before we sit down with the state and other Central Oregon counties, other Region 2 counties from AOC's perspective, to really have this discussion. So the people that want to get involved are going to get involved right now.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe this is correct, but it's a question that you could ask on the 21st is through Senate Bill 80 again, only the county commissioners and their staff are allowed to engage
Mhm.
the state agency representatives from the Department of Forestry and Oregon State. My understanding that they will receive the input that all of the affected counties that are subject to Senate Bill 762 and Senate Bill 80, they will receive that input and potentially make some adjustments consistent with the law. Then at a date to be determined, they release it to the public. And that process, if I had to make an educated guess, will probably occur later this fall or well into 2024.
So we can think of this as a extrapolation of the current information that the state has provided us to be edited in the near future.
And that's
At some level.
That's a point of
Yep.
clarity because
Good point.
once the public responds, and those that are in the high hazard zones in a WUI will get notification, right, of that implication. Once the public responds, then the Department of Forest, then the state agencies go back to the counties for a second bite at the apple, for one last opportunity to provide feedback and observations, at which point the next step is to finalize the map. So I think it would be helpful to think about the types of questions you want, because your constituents this information is going to get out. We forwarded it to COBA.
Yeah.
We forwarded it to CORE. We had our coordination meeting yesterday.
Good.
We're being transparent. It's now part of the public record. But the board is going to, if you haven't already, well, Commissioner Dare already did, but in terms of a constituent who was concerned about their circumstances in Deschutes River Woods.
Oh, well, that was
all I meant.
yesterday's conversation.
Yeah, but you're going to get comments and questions from your constituents about, are these maps final? What's the iterative process? And getting that clarity on the 21st from the agencies about what those iterative steps are, what they mean, I think will be helpful for everyone because, and I say this respectfully, it similar to Senate Bill 762, the Senate Bill 80 rollout, I think there's genuine attempt to get the information out there. The messaging from the state has been less than ideal because we're not able to tell you
Mhm.
precisely the schedule, the timeline, how the map iteration process works, and your constituents are going to ask these questions. And so I think it'll be important to consider those types of questions and any others that come up, so you can have clarity, and ultimately all of us can communicate to residents within Deschutes County so they can stay involved and be informed and have a better understanding of what this process means for them.
So another thought, remember we went through a Deschutes County proper exercise about wildfire maps years ago before this even came and this came about, knowing that the state was going to talk about this. And we determined that the county is in a high wildfire area. I mean, basically, it was hard to discern in the whole Deschutes County the difference between low, medium, and high. So the published map, which didn't mean the same thing because we didn't have hardening requirements or defensible space requirements per se. I mean, we've been working hard to do that. So basically, when we published a map previously, the county published the map, it was all red. It was all high. And then you think of it as the Santiam fire gone to Detroit Lake, that was a hot, dry east wind that just took it 20, 40, 50 miles. I don't know how far it was, 100 miles or whatever it was. I mean, I just look at, Crater Lake, and it talks about moderate all around Crater Lake, not Crater Lake, but Paulina and East Lake. I mean, if there's a fire, lightning strike fire on the east side of that lake with a hot, dry, wind-driven event, it'll just go. It'll go all the way across the county. So it puts it in perspective. East side of Bend could be that same situation. It'd be a freak weather event. It'd be hot, dry conditions after a few weeks of dry conditions, human caused or naturally caused wind driven event. And it could blow through just about anything, which we saw in Lahaina just months ago. So.
I mean, speaking of that, one of the things I'd like us to understand, so kind of flag this as a question we want to check into is, how much does this recognize fuels reduction work that has been done? Because that area you just mentioned, the Newberry National Monument, that was all part of the Rocket project that the Forest Service started implementing maybe 7 years ago, and they've done thousands and thousands of acres of fuels reduction work in there. Take a step back. I just want to mention. To preview what we're going to get in next week, I attended virtually the District 5 meeting with all of these state agencies. And one of the most helpful parts of the presentation that was provided was the explanation of what is the difference between the risk maps that were produced before and the hazard maps that are being produced now. And there's more to it than just going from 3 to 5, 5 to 3 categories. Even though the maps themselves don't look that different. So that was interesting, kind of how they described what variables went into these maps, but then how the maps don't look that much different. It's also was extremely interesting, but just to be clear, because I think it would be helpful to understand what these maps are representing. The variables fell into 3 categories when they were risk maps. Burn probability. So just like, what's the likelihood of ignition in a given place? Fire intensity, given the fuels, how big are the flame lengths going to be? How hot is the fire going to be? Susceptibility, and by susceptibility, they were trying to get at specifically, how susceptible is a given house or a given property. To their credit, everybody recognized that the state is not capable of doing a susceptibility analysis. Because they just can't get down to that fine scale and recognize, oh, well, you used concrete siding on your house is less susceptible. So for the hazard maps, so the reason, relabeling from risk to hazard wasn't just rebranding. It was actually, they dropped out the susceptibility variables. So these maps, basically what you see there is a reflection of burn probability, likelihood that a fire is going to occur in a given place, and fire intensity to the best of the state's knowledge. Now, I'm not sure whether they modeled those two factors right. And, to get to Kevin's point about like, there's areas here that, as far as I can tell, the conditions are no different than the ones right next door that are high hazard. And I have concerns that that there's more probability and more risk of high intensity fire than this map is currently depicting. So it would be actually, I would really like to see those risk maps that we produced for our own purposes way back when, for comparison purposes. And if there has been work done, because the Forest Service is doing thousands and thousands of acres of fuels reduction every year, then maybe those maps are out of date in some ways. But also, I suspect also, my vague recollection is that they showed a lot more area in high risk than this map does, and that would be helpful for us to understand.
Well, I think there's a set of decision-making maps where it's just like, what if, so that's probably the value is, there was some good detailed analysis getting to that map. If we defined it as this is what it would look like. If we defined it as this is what it would look like. So those are probably the analysis. Yeah. Can you pull those up for us?
I might be able to dig it out of my email box.
I know.
If you put it at the top, it'll be easier.
I've taken a note to follow up on that.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, we need to understand that the argument about whether people have done something to make their home more resilient, those aren't variables that are in this map. It's burn probability, it's predicted fire intensity at the landscape scale. So it does, I believe, if you do those, if you model those two things right, it will give you a good understanding of where we have hazard, where people are in hazard in our community. And then it's our, then we take that information and we go the next step and say, what can you do to mitigate that hazard to these people, either at the individual homeowner scale, at the county level, in terms of policy making, all kinds of things.
So this is in preparation for next week, next Thursday. Any other discussion?
No, I do find it fascinating that somebody who has hay fields and two incredibly large ponds here is considered high. All the agriculture that I drive by, it's still in the top category. So, I see that they've just kind of painted it, and you can see some of the ponds, and then one pond is enormous, and I drive right by that, and I'm like, no, their pond isn't that big, but on this map it shows really big. So yeah, it's when you know the specific spots of the mapping, you can, and then the fact that outside of Sisters, where they did, they took out the 2,500 trees, it's yellow. What is the word? It's moderate. So, but some of these other spots where I feel like it could be yellow there too.
It's an interesting question. If you look kind of at the far east of the map, and we don't have a zoom map in that, you'll see that those kind of the southeasternmost part of the county, you can very clearly see those large pivot irrigations that have been, and I looked at those specifically between the previous maps and those maps, and they were sort of partially mapped amorphous blobs in the previous iteration. And now, you could, you can see them very clearly. So I don't know to what extent agricultural operations were refigured in the calculation of the maps.
It will show up. I mean, again, these maps are about burn probability, and that a lot of that's just past history. How much, how likely is it that a fire is going to get started there? And then fire intensity. So if you have a very large irrigated area, I'm guessing that a high risk is probably mostly driven by burn probability. And we can question that. You can say, I mean, on Thursday next week, we can say, help us understand why you assign such a high burn probability to these acres east of our incorporated cities. And I hope they'll have a good answer. I mean, our job is to help them get all the variables and the analysis in the model right. And if they do get that right, then it'll show up as more accurate mapping of these things.
Oh, and I do want to acknowledge that Kevin told me this morning he has another 100,000 to help get rid of the juniper through BLM. So he's going to be working on that. If anyone's listening, there is funding. So thank you, Kevin.
Okay, anything else?
Just, Commissioners, I'm not going to take us down this path, but it's hard not to think about.
Mhm.
So what is this going to mean going forward? Just so it's on our radar in
Yeah.
terms of, so what is the timeline for compliance? Who is ensuring compliance? Who is ensuring who's conducting enforcement? Because if these issues fall on the county in the future operations, we're not going to need one county forester. We're going to need 3 county foresters. We're not going to need in code compliance. If that's where it lands, we're not going to need 3 or 4 or 5 code compliance techs. We're going to need 10 or 15. I mean, so just these are issues that we just also need to be aware of going forward. Great to focus on these now. Not going to take us down that, but I want that to be
Yep.
in our
No, and
minds
that's
as
where I
well.
was going to. What are the implications of this? Peter?
I may just other questions that you may want to consider, and I don't know if it makes sense if maybe this is a placeholder as the board digest this information. Obviously, Kevin's offered some, I think, very astute observations just at a landscape scale. There is a board meeting next week, a work session, and to the extent that you wanted to continue a conversation with any of us, if you wanted maps to be produced, we would do everything we can to turn that around. To the question that I was going to pose to you that you might consider asking is, so one of the next agenda items deals with getting our current code as it pertains to Title 15 and the building code, and as it pertains to wood shake roofs. That's going to be another topic. But as part of that separate topic, the Building Codes Division has updated R327, which are the fire hardening requirements, and those essentially will come into play once these wildfire maps are acknowledged by the state. So for CDD, when that happens, properties that are subject to this law will of course be flagged and processed accordingly with those requisite design elements. To the question, I'm not entirely clear how defensible space is going to be handled. It's my understanding, imperfectly, that the state fire marshal will be leading that effort. And I have heard anecdotally, which is all that represents, is that they're going to be leading more with a carrot approach, really kind of encouraging and trying to be proactive to get those responsible property owners that are subject to this new law to guide them to defensible space as opposed to enforcing in a strict fashion a certain timeline or deadline. But you might consider asking how that process will unfold. It goes to Nick's question, what if any role is there? What if any roles are there for affected counties as it pertains to staff? But I think that's my understanding is it shifts to the state fire marshal, and with all due respect to our county forester and our planning manager, I don't think we will be involved, but a good question to ask.
Yes.
The state fire marshal does not have the capacity to go door to door and do technical assistance and consultations with people. So how they delegate responsibility and authority to fire districts, to county foresters. I mean, most counties don't have a county forester or a community wildfire protection coordinator. So how they delegate those duties to local communities is definitely something that, that's the number one question I have. And because I previewed District 5's meeting, I can also tell you they will, the state will have the whole gamut of people there. ODF, OSU, the state fire marshal, the insurance commissioner, building codes. They will have all of those entities at this meeting on Thursday to ask questions.
Yeah, Kevin, have you been waiting?
Yeah, to that point, I mean, I guess first off, to get back to the map, I know when you use the land fire data, I do know that wildfires are incorporated into the risk as far as the changing in the vegetation. And my understanding is the new land fire model does incorporate fuel treatments to some effect. I think that's only on federal lands, as far as I know. I don't know if there's really any effect on non-federal lands. I don't know if that's actual satellite imagery or if that's endpoint data. It could be a combination of both. But it does seem that their fuel treatments do seem to line up with this map in some regards, at least on federal land. In regards to the potential code, we do have the flammable vegetation code in City of Bend as something to kind of view as how that has worked presently and historically. It's voluntary compliance is really what they look for. I don't think code enforcement is, the City of Bend doesn't have the capacity to do code enforcement. So they, primarily use voluntary compliance. And then if they can't get to that point, there might be some kind of enforcement. I have also heard that Oregon State Fire Marshal would take this on for compliance. But it's more so the ask that would be requested of me to get people into compliance, because that's primarily my job, is to assist property owners within Deschutes County to meet those standards. And obviously, if there's a code, that's really going to exponentially increase.
Yeah. But watch out for the unfunded mandate, which will be Association of Oregon Counties. Will be looking out for that everywhere. It's like, hey, this is a great idea. If there's a big tangible project there, who's paying for it? Okay, thank you very much. We may talk about this again before next Thursday, and we'll be prepared for it.
And you all will get us those historic, the earlier iterations of county.
We'll take a look and see at the resources that we have and produce the best that we can with what we have.
And Kevin, you started giving us a list of places that were ranked moderate, and maybe they should be high. You said DRW, south of Sun River. Like, if you could make sure that we all have like a full list,
A comprehensive list. Yeah, I could put together a comprehensive list of not necessarily whether they should be ranked high or moderate, but consistency wise, based on everything else on the map.
Yeah.
To be consistent.
What differentiates them and
Yeah.
why? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you could produce a map for us with some red circles on them.
Yeah.
Just for discussion.
Pinpoint places
starters.
that are very curious.
Yeah, discussion starters. Say, okay, well, how did this get to be this?
Well, they are spending a couple $100,000 on cleaning up Deschutes River Woods, thank goodness. So,
But
Okay.
I mean, yeah, there's, Aubrey Butte, just the topography, there's been some work done up there, but I mean, I don't think Aubrey Butte is to a point where you could call it moderate risk personally. So
Yeah. And when I first looked at this map, I did take that approach of, if people do the work, should they be reduced to a lower classification? And then when I thought about it more holistically, that risk doesn't necessarily go away if the vegetation is treated, because the vegetation grows back. So, I mean, it can be maintained to a standard, but it still doesn't negate the potential risk that's there already. So.
yeah, and that is one more question to flag. If these maps recognize the current state of vegetation, then how do you account for vegetation growing over time? I mean, there's, over by Detroit Lake, burn, all these places that were burned to the ground, there's not a lot of fuel there right now. But 20 years from now, there will be. So will these maps be updated on a regular basis, or is this, a point in time that we're going to be stuck with for 30 years?
And to Commissioner Chang, I think that's an excellent question to ask on Thursday. My understanding is the law requires those maps to be frequently or regularly updated. But when and if and how and what process remains to be determined.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 7, public hearing consideration of an ordinance concerning the local wildfire hazard zone and Oregon residential specialty code updates regarding wildfire hazard mitigation. So this was talked about at a work session previously. Will.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have this is a public hearing. I've got
Okay.
that we'll dig into here in a bit. And I'll be loading up a PowerPoint presentation as well to take you through this process.
And I'll start the first item here. So this is the time and place set for a hearing on file number 24723-649-TA concerning text amendments to address the standards of the Deschutes County Wildfire Hazard Zone and forthcoming updates to the Oregon Residential Specialty Code concerning wildfire hazard mitigation.
Thank you, Chair. The Board of County Commissioners will hear oral testimony, receive written testimony, and consider the testimony submitted at this hearing. This hearing is also being recorded. The board may make a decision on this matter today, continue the public hearing to a date certain, or leave the written record open for a specified period of time. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. Staff will give a report on this issue. We will then open the hearing to all present and ask people to present testimony at one of the tables or the podium. You can also provide the board with a copy of written testimony. This is a hybrid hearing. If you're participating in person, please fill out a blue sign-up sheet and submit that to the board secretary at the side of the room, and you will be called to the table to provide testimony. For remote participants, please indicate that you'd like to provide testimony by using the raise hand function in Zoom or by dialing *9 if you're participating via phone. The chair will then call on participants with hands raised to provide testimony. Questions to and from the chair may be entertained at any time at the chair's discretion. Cross-examination of people testifying will not be allowed. However, if any person wishes to ask a question of another person during that person's testimony, please direct your question to the chair after being recognized. The chair is free to decide whether or not to ask such questions to the person testifying. Prior to commencement of the hearing, any party may challenge the qualifications of any commissioner for conflict of interest. This challenge must be documented with specific reasons and supported by facts. Should any commissioner be challenged, that member may disqualify him or herself, withdraw from the hearing, or make a statement on the record of their capacity to hear and decide this issue. At this time, do any members of the commission need to set forth any information they may believe would be perceived as a conflict of interest?
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed.
I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
And I have nothing to disclose either, and I think I can proceed. Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner based on conflicts of interest? Is there any raised hand feature? As no challenges are presented, the hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief report.
Thank you. And if I could get up on the Zoom screen, I think I've got my share screen up. Is it possible to present that? Thank you. So again, this is the Wildlife Hazard Zone text amendments, file number 247-230-00649 TA, applicants Deschutes County. We've talked here already about the board hearing procedure. I'll just hit some highlights from the slides. Of course, there will be a 3-minute time limit per party, and that timer will be available up on the screens. Please, before starting any testimony, members of the public provide their first and last name and mailing address so that we can keep you in the loop. And again, the blue sign-up sheets to provide testimony are available by the door at the side of the room. Again, if you'd like to provide testimony through Zoom, if you're a hybrid participant, there is the raise hand button available in Zoom, or *9 on your phone keypad. Written testimony can be submitted directly to staff in person by handing that to me, or it can be emailed to staff at kyle.collins@deschutes.org or williamgroves@deschutes.org. Of course, it's important for us to have an orderly and respectful hearing. And we have been through the commissioner disclosures. So that would lead us into our staff report today. So this is a county initiated proposal to modify the existing building code standards of the Deschutes County Wildlife Hazard Zone. The currently adopted wildfire hazard zone. The currently adopted wildfire hazard zone includes all areas of Deschutes County. Deschutes County Wildfire Hazard Zone is separate and distinct from the ongoing efforts that we were just talking about to create a wildfire hazard map pursuant to Senate Bill 762 and Senate Bill 80. The standards imposed by the county's local hazard map are adopted under Title 15 Building and Construction, Section 1504085 of the county code. Based on the adoptions in 2001, the board adopted a wildfire hazard map, and the state residential building code at that time exclusively prohibited wooden shake roofing for newly constructed residences and residential accessory structures. So to be clear, in 2001, the board was concerned about fire hazard, adopted a map that identified the county, which I'll show you here later, countywide as entirely a high hazard zone, and made one requirement based on that, which was to preclude residential and residential accessory structures from having wooden shake roofs. And here is a copy of that map that was adopted in 2001, identifying the entire county as high hazard. So a concern: on October 1st, 2023, a new version of the building code becomes effective, and section R327 detailing wildfire hazard mitigation standards will be modified. And the forthcoming section of R327 would apply across all residential development in Deschutes County based on the existing map. The modified R327 still would apply to all dwellings of residential accessory structures, but would also, in addition to the wooden shake roofs, would bring in requirements for roofing requirements, overhead projection requirements, deck, porch, balcony requirements, ventilation requirements, and other standards. So should the board wish to maintain the current status quo and keep wildfire mitigation standards limited to that prohibition on wooden shake roofs, DCC 1504085 needs to be upgraded with more specific language regarding the roofing requirements of R327. The proposed language to maintain the current status quo within the wildfire hazard zone is presented as part of the current ordinance. So let's talk about the relationship of this and Senate Bill 762 and 80. Based on these bills, once the state wildfire hazard map is approved by the Oregon Department of Forestry, the complete suite of R327 standards will apply through the building code more broadly to Deschutes County, and specifically will be targeted to those properties that are within the boundary of the wildland urban interface and mapped as high hazard. Again, ultimately, properties identified as having a high hazard and located within that wildland urban interface would be subject to additional fire mitigation standards. At this time, no jurisdictions are mandated to implement the full suite of R327s prior to release of the state wildfire hazard map. I want to say this maybe again in a more folksy way. We had adopted a map in 2001, identifying the entire county as subject to hazard, and said we wanted to prohibit residential and residential accessory structures from having certain types of roofs. Because there are a number of fire initiatives moving throughout the state, and one of them being in the building code, there's an unintended effect. And that is that Deschutes County would be drawn wholesale into requiring all construction to adhere to the latest standards. And the intent, of course, at the state level is that those standards be deployed with some property specific clarity with regard to the hazard and the WUI status of the property. So this text amendment today is intended to maintain the status quo, continue to prohibit wooden shake roofs on residential structures, but not to leapfrog the state process or require the hardening, the R327 hardening countywide for properties that ultimately would not be subject to that under a differential mapping. Now, it's important to note that the board will likely have to revisit this section in the future. Once ODF does approve the hazard maps, we'll probably need to do some integration in this section. So this is a kind of patch of the day that we'll need to come back to integrate into the state wildfire maps once those are available. Again, the proposed amendments would affect Title 15. This proposal isn't a legislative change because it doesn't affect the comprehensive plan zoning ordinances or subdivision and partition ordinances or change zoning maps. And so as such, review by the Planning Commission wasn't required. In terms of next steps, as usual, we talk about the board's options following the public hearing, and those include continuing the hearing to a date and time certain, closing the hearing and leaving the written record open, or closing the hearing and setting a date for deliberations, or finally, the staff recommendation, which would be to close the hearing, commence deliberations, and adopt ordinance 2023-021 by emergency. I put up on the screen staff contacts, and we are available for questions.
You mentioned it's not a legislative change, but it's a legislative process because it references everybody across all the rural county. And this wouldn't apply to the cities.
That's yes, and it's a little bit unclear in our code how to handle these matters, so we're handling it belt and suspenders with the full process that we'd handle for other hearings, with the understanding that that should be sufficient.
And do you have the proposed word change in the slide? I mean, I have it here. I was just trying to display it because really the conundrum is that we reference wildfire hazard mitigation section of the Oregon Residential Specialty Code before there was a thing called R327. And by having that generic reference, it implies R327, which implies the whole thing. So we're really just getting more clarity on the fact that, yes, we'll acknowledge R327 and to align with what we've done since 2001, just the roofing section.
That is
For today.
exactly correct. Unfortunately, I don't have a slide specific
that's
to that, but yeah, you're correct. It's striking wildfire hazard mitigation and replacing that with R327 roofing. So
Yep. So it's just
relatively
taking a real
minor.
generic statement and making it defined.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is a public hearing on the matter. As I say, we had a work session and it's on the agenda. So, and I don't see anybody in the room for this matter. Is there anybody remotely? As I say, I mean, this is for point of clarity. Was there any other specific notification? I guess you said you had sat down with kind of realtors and builders recently. Was it mentioned? As I say, I mean, this is basically no effect is what we're trying to implement here.
Again, for the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. The conversation that I had with COBA and CORE was about Senate Bill 80. This is
Yeah.
just kind of
Just
maintaining the status quo.
Yep.
So
Not much engagement.
and raise the issue yesterday.
Okay, that's fine. So this is a public hearing on the matter. Is there anyone here to speak? And officially, I might ask this, but is there anyone online? No raised hand feature. So at this time, we will close the public hearing on this matter. Thank you for the presentation and the discussion about what we're really doing here. Just a few words to clarify R327 roofing instead of a generic statement referring to wildfire hazard mitigation section of the Oregon Residential Specialty Code. Any discussion?
I think it's pretty clear. We don't want the R327 codes applied across the entire county. We want them applied eventually to the high hazard and WUI areas on that map, on the future iterations of that map. So that's,
What supports that?
Yes,
Okay, is there a motion?
I move approval of first. Can I move first and second reading at the same?
Mhm.
yes,
I'll move approval of first and second reading of ordinance number 2023-021 by title only.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Adair,
Yes,
and Chair votes yes. So this is first reading of ordinance number 2023-021, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 15, Building and Construction Codes and Regulations to modify the development standards for the wildfire hazard zone. And this is second reading, ordinance number 2023-021, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 15, Building and Construction Codes and Regulations to modify the development standards for the wildfire hazard zone.
And I would like to note, Chair, that this ordinance, as you've read it, declares an emergency and makes it effective upon this reading.
Yeah, so so the title doesn't read like that. I will acknowledge that was the intention. Do I just say,
Fine. In the second motion.
okay,
Move adoption, I move adoption of ordinance number 2023-021 on an emergency basis to take effect immediately upon adoption.
Second.
so acknowledging this is being implemented at this time. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Okay, we've changed a few words in our code today.
Thank you.
Item number 8, board decision on land use file 24723-125-DR, initiation of use.
You guys need a
Yeah, we've got the packet. I think we're all set. So Avery, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, commissioners. For the record, Avery Johnson, Assistant Planner. The item before the board this morning is a draft decision, John Watson, initiation of use file. Staff has drafted, along with legal counsel, this decision, which reflects your deliberations from August 23rd. And with that, staff is available for any questions.
I have no further questions.
I have none.
So the only point I had in the background and policy implications, it talks about and I was looking for it in the decision, so I didn't do my homework on this, but maybe it is in here. So about halfway down the paragraph, the board finds that because the marijuana production use is no longer allowed in the exclusive foreign use zone and is appropriate to consider these expenditures made prior to land use approval. And I was just the concept of this land use approval, just making it real specific. That's in the memo. So I was just looking for a reference like that in the decision, maybe. Just the concept is it's only because of the scenario around marijuana production and the fact that you couldn't even go back and ask for the use again. We don't need to take it anywhere. Just using my own words here. So I support this decision as written.
Yeah, I do as well. We never want to give people the impression that they can start their project before they get their land use approvals, but we in many cases, we do go back and cure for people things that they have already done. And to be consistent, I think we should provide this applicant that opportunity with, again, the reminder that we never want to encourage anyone to start their project before they get their permits.
Well, and for hearings officers also. I mean, that's kind of the intention here. For a hearings officer to come to this conclusion is not the intention of how our land use system works. So with that, is there a motion?
I move approval of board signature of document number 2023-849, revising the hearings officer's decision approving a declaratory ruling and initiation of use application for a marijuana production facility at 26295 Willard Road in Bend.
So I'll second it if you're,
Yeah, you can second it.
and I will second it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Adair,
No,
and chair votes yes.
Thank you, commissioners.
thank you, Avery.
Thank you. We're getting through it today. Item number 9, second reading of ordinance 2023-015 LBNW plan amendment zone change.
Good morning, commissioners. For the record, Anthony Regini, principal planner. As you noted, this is second reading of ordinance 2023-015. I do want to thank Brenda for cleaning up my recommended motion section for the agenda request. That looks much better than what it looks much better than what I had. So I thank you, Brenda, for that. Appreciate it. So 2 recommended motions, move approval of second reading of the ordinance 2023-015, title only, and then move adoption of ordinance 2023-015.
Okay, so yeah, second reading. So this has been through a process. And is there a motion?
I move approval, a second reading of ordinance number 2023-015 by title only.
Yep, and I will second it. Interesting scenarios today, so I will second it. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
No.
and I will vote yes. So this is second reading of ordinance number 2023-015. An ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 23, the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plan, to change the comprehensive plan of map designation for certain property from agriculture to rural industrial, and amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, the Deschutes County zoning map, to change the zoning designation for certain property from exclusive farm use to rural industrial.
I move of adoption of ordinance number 2023-015.
And I will second it. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
No.
and Chair votes yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you, Anthony.
Item number 10, authorization of insurance, issuance of debt, sorry, not insurance. Issuance of, I know, I was trying to resolve that. So issuance of debt for courthouse expansion and potential refinancing.
Morning, Chair DeBonne, Commissioners. Robert Tintel, Chief Financial Officer.
Lee Randall, Facilities Director.
So yes, as mentioned, we are here today for the issuance of courthouse debt. There are two pieces to this that we are considering under your consideration for today. The first is issuing a $20.5 million bond for the courthouse expansion project. As you know, through our conversations, the total project cost is $40.5 million. We were fortunate enough to receive $15 million from the state, or we're anticipating that coming through. That's as a result of Senate Bill 5506. And then we also allocated $5 million of funds, $4.6 million through the local assistance and travel consistency funds. And we did receive our second payment of that. So now we've received the full allocation from the U.S. Treasury for that amount. And then also $400,000 from ARPA discretionary interest earnings for a total of $5 million to buy down the debt, therefore to reach the $20.5 million bond cost. The other option that we're considering is refunding our 2013 bonds. And that is to take advantage of interest rates from what we had to what we believe we can achieve now. Now, when we went out for the Negus transfer bond, this option was also on the table at the time to refund that, but the market conditions it wasn't beneficial to do it at that time. So it's included in the resolution again to look at that at the time when we have our bond sale to see if it's also beneficial. Right now, it's looking like it is because they were effective June 1st, 2023 is when it's a regular refunding, not an advance refunding as prior. So things are a little different. If we do the refunding, it goes through, that saves debt service payments of about $30,000 a year. So not that big, but it makes a difference. And over the life of the bond, it saves $349,000 of debt service payments, but net present value about $228,000. A lot of numbers thrown out there. It's all in the packet posted online.
H2.
H2. But what that does tell you is when you are thinking about doing a refunding, it should meet certain thresholds. Usually it's like $100,000 in savings or 2%. We definitely are over those criteria. So as long as market conditions allow, we'd like to continue with refunding. It's like refinancing your house at a lower rate, essentially is what that is. So those are the two options that are before you today that's included in the resolution. The bond attorneys have drafted the resolution. Legal counsel has also reviewed the resolution. And so it's ready for that. I do have Lee here in case any questions come up about the courthouse project as well. With that, I'll turn it back over to you for questions.
What's the interest rate from 2013?
Oh, that's a good question. It was
I guess, yeah, I was looking for it. I didn't see how to
Yeah,
find
yeah.
it.
I'd have to relook at that and see. Right now, we are anticipating the interest rate to be about 4%. We're hoping it'll come around 4%.
So was it about the same?
It was a little bit higher on those because otherwise we wouldn't be achieving the savings.
Yeah,
for
okay.
that.
Well, so that's interesting to see
Yeah.
that because must have been right after that, things went down for 10 years and then they came back.
Yes.
So that, yeah.
Yeah, they definitely went up.
So but 2013, we were looking at 4%, which seemed to be a reasonable amount, probably. It might have been working its way down and we were happy with that amount. Because that just happens to be the one time I have been involved at that level. And then for the motion, it's kind of generic saying refunding the county's full faith and credit bonds. Is that just kind of a wide open statement on purpose? You know, so recommended motion.
It's the one in the resolution. Actually, it's approving resolution and it is.
Okay, so the
referenced-
resolution clarifies that it's for that specific. I was just reading well, so it's still generic.
Yeah.
So
The resolution does speak to the 2013 bond specifically for $8.4 million,
okay, so just the
the original principal
Yep.
amount.
that's where it's real clear. Yeah, so it's just say, I was just kind of surprised to see the motion be so generic on the statement, but it's because it's in the
Specific
resolution. Yep. Okay. Well, so as I say, in the big picture, I remember thinking that, well, we'll be able to put some money together for the courthouse. So at this point, we basically receive money from the legislature and the federal government, and we're going to bond the rest, which puts us in a spot where we have, you know, I always thought we were going to come up with maybe $5 or $10 million more, you know, just out of general fund reserves or dollars or whatever. So you know, by doing this at this 20.5, it just feels like, and I mean, Commissioner Dare knows numbers a lot more than me, but it just feels like, you know, this gives us our kind of internal reserves for other capital projects and the work we're doing in a more comfortable fashion. And we're taking on some debt.
The really outstanding news is that on September 28th, we have a meeting set up with the Ninth Circuit Court business development directors from San Francisco with Lee and some other people. And Robert, you're going to need to be added to that Zoom conversation too, about if they come in and finish the third floor. And then if we can actually charge them something for the whole, you know, for being there. So something like what we have here now with the state being involved. But the really good news is bringing a federal court system to Deschutes County, which will definitely benefit this side of the state. So people in the winter won't have to go over the mountain and, you know, just making things a little more convenient for our entire community. So that's actually looking incredibly promising. Chief Justice Marco Hernandez has been all over this. He keeps telling me that government takes a long time, but this is actually moving ahead. So we have
I
it.
see that as a very separate project. And
Right.
Building a building and then somebody might want to use some of it.
Well, they want to use the third floor.
Yeah,
They wanted
that's
to use the
a
whole
separate
floor,
project.
I
but
mean, if we were to secure some funds from that, you know, kind of annual lease payments or something like that, it's not possible for us to accelerate our principal buy down, is it? I mean, we make fixed payments each year and we can't pay more to buy down our principal.
The best option for that would be at 10 years, we do have the option to call the bonds. So it'd be good to set that money aside. And then at the 10-year mark, then we could call those bonds at that time and then pay off the debt if something like that did come about.
It's a good option to have.
Yes.
Well, I wish we had more in reserves at this moment in time to put towards this project. I also wish that we had started earlier so we could have captured lower rates in the period when those were available. But this is an extremely important project for our community, and I'm glad to see it moving forward.
well, the interesting thing is the AOC meeting, I don't know if you participated in the one, but they're still not happy with Deschutes County. They're like, I don't know how Deschutes County ended up with 15 million. Thank you, Judy Trigo, for having a relationship with Senator Steiner. Honestly, that's what it was. There were maybe 8 counties that didn't even get like $22,000 in their request. So, you know, and thank goodness as you said, it's general funds from the state so that we are not limited only to 10% because the federal project really wanted to take more, and that would have only been like 5,000 square feet. And they really would love to take the whole floor is what I've been told. So that's about 9,000 square feet, I believe.
I think we need to thank our legislative delegation, bipartisan, D's and R's, that cover Deschutes County. Their work and their influence in the legislature, I think, is the primary reason why we secured $15 million.
I'll just, final comment, if the board does approve this resolution, we are scheduled on November 16th for the bond sale, and that's when we'll know the actual interest rate and interest in these bonds at that time.
Yeah, so it's still a fluid market.
So 3.96 is
It's the best estimate from the financial advisors at this point in time, where they expect the market to be.
So they don't give us a little guarantee or anything
There's no rate locks, like
Yeah.
what you are.
with the home
house-
mortgage?
Yeah.
Is is there a Fed meeting expected to possibly raise or not raise in the near future, this month or something?
I think they're going to
Did
raise it
just
again.
happen?
There is, and yeah, there is debate back and forth on whether it will be
The next couple
raised or
weeks.
not. But it should not, since these are long-term rates, it should not greatly affect that. There is a little
Yeah.
built-in buffer there, so we'll see.
Interesting. Well, and so then the inverted yield curve is opportunity for us at this time? Do we think of it like that?
Yeah, now that's another point. We are, if we go for the bond now and we're not using the funds, we'll be having an escrow account for at least 90 days, earning more interest on that money, or for the refunding as well. And so we'll be taking advantage of this short-term high interest rate with these financings as well.
Okay.
So
Yeah. is there-
we do a motion.
Mhm.
Move approval of resolution number 2023-051, authorizing financing of a project in a principal amount not to exceed 20,500,000 and refunding the county's full faith and credit bonds.
second.
Any other discussion? I'll just acknowledge, as I say, the last 10 years, when we look at our annual financial reporting, we've really taken debt down to minimal for Deschutes County. So as I say, it's an awkward to take on debt during a time of rising inflation rates, but the proportion of debt associated with the size of our county is just minimal. So pretty exciting. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments, Lee?
I'll be here to discuss the next,
Okay, there we go.
questions we can.
Yep.
Thank you both for getting us here.
Item number 11, Pence Early Work Contract Amendment for Deschutes County Courthouse Expansion Project.
Good morning again, Lee Randall, Facilities Director. Eric Nielsen, Capital Improvement Manager. We're here this morning for the board to consider early work contract amendment for the Deschutes County Courthouse Expansion Project. And this is an amendment to an existing contract with Pence Contractors. They were selected through a public procurement process as the construction manager, general contractor for the project. They've worked closely with the design team up to this point, and we anticipate that we'll be submitting for permits through the city of Bend shortly in the next few weeks. And Erica will be able to talk about the project schedule shortly. This amendment will allow us to begin work while the project is in permit review with the city of Bend. That scope of work will include procurement of mechanical and electrical equipment, the courtroom mock-up, site logistics, site utilities, demolition, earthwork, temporary construction, entrance and egress, and all of those things that it would take to get the project started. We've had several meetings with the city of Bend about the process and what work we can expect to be able to do while the more in-depth permit review and plan review of the construction documents is underway. So this is a way for us to expedite the project and move forward. The total cost of the proposed cost of the amendment is $4,513,562. I'm sorry, $4,513,562. The amendment does not increase the overall budget estimate for the project. So when we come back to the board
for the guaranteed maximum price, which would be for the entire construction cost of the project. This would be incorporated into that guaranteed maximum price, not in addition to it. So our total budget estimate remains within the budget that we've discussed previously with the board. And then finally, as I mentioned, we expect for the guaranteed maximum price to be back in front of the board, probably in late winter, early spring. But Eric can talk to our projected schedule at this.
Yeah, so currently, after we submit for permit, the plan is to have subcontractor bids due in mid-November to Pence contractors. And then we'll negotiate with Pence on the actual GMP price. So tentatively, yeah, we could have an amendment in December, January. And then moving on from that, we're kind of staggering the permits with the city. So we anticipate getting started on infrastructure work in February, foundations to follow in March, and then building permit received in April. So those are all tentative dates, pending city review timelines.
So for that guaranteed maximum price, it's better to get closer to the actual project implementation to have better pricing. But we haven't put pencil to paper on the guaranteed maximum price. We just know the scope of that 40.5 and fit in that container of finances.
Correct. And since Pence came on board, we've had a series of budget estimates specific to the point in time that we were at with the plan development and the construction documents. So as we get closer to that final construction set, we're able to get more accurate cost estimates and essentially reduce the contingency, reduce those variables, and have more consistent and strict pricing. And then by the time we get to that guaranteed maximum price, then we've dialed in the exact cost of what that construction amount will be. The guaranteed maximum price will be just for the construction costs related to the project. In addition to that, we have design costs, permitting costs, system development charges with the city of Bend.
Yeah.
That all add up to that $40.5 million price tag for the construction for the expansion, and then the additional 1.5 million related to internal improvements within the building.
Yep.
And that 1.5 million is an amount that the county had received from the state last year.
I would just add that this early work amendment also allows Pence to bring on early trade partners for MEP scope of work. So it'll allow them to kind of zero in the scope, get more definitive pricing, and then procure that equipment early. So to your point,
MEP.
yeah, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
Okay, now I know.
Yeah, so they're kind of the big dollar, high lead or long lead time items. So we're going to be able to procure those items early.
So you're ordering them early because of the wait time,
Correct.
the warning from Crook County. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
And to tie to the item we just discussed, these $4 point whatever million will this come out of do we anticipate this will come out of the LATCF funds that are coming in, the state money, or the newly issued bonds?
As we go forward, we'll confirm that more specifically with Robert, but essentially the funding that we have on hand will be financing the project up through the issuance of the bonds. And then with the resolution that the board had approved earlier, we'll be able to make decisions about paying back our funds that have been expended to this point prior to the issuance of the bond. So essentially, I think the short answer is yes. We would use the funds that are on hand that have been allocated to the project for this portion of the cost.
Brenda, next time, attachment B, could we do that on like legal paper or something? So it's a little easier to read. It would, it's quite teeny. Thank you.
Well, it's exciting to, have our partner on board, the subs that are going to come on board, the budgeting, the architecture that's been done. So, I'm really looking forward to the partnership of our CMGC contractor plus everybody else going to be able to work out there. So here we go. This is it. We're really spending money on the project, I guess, is my realization. So is there a motion or any other discussion?
Move approval of document number 2023-839, the Pence Contractors Early Work Amendment.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Thank you very much. Item number 12, amendment number 1 to Oregon Health Authority Grant Agreement for Public Health. A little bit early. Good.
Here. Okay, good morning, commissioners. For the record, I'm Heather Keisner, Deschutes County Public Health Director, and I think I am the only one here today. So today I'm here to seek approval of chair signature of document 2023-819, which is the Oregon Health Authority Agreement. This is an amendment number 1. There'll probably be more of the Oregon Health Authority intergovernmental agreement approved by the Board of County Commissioners on June 28th, 2023. And this amendment number 1 includes program element descriptions and funding for the Ryan White Case Management Program, as well as our suicide prevention programs, and provides anticipated funding totaling $669,814. And I just wanted to kind of give a quick background on those 2 programs. Yeah.
This isn't probably your fault, but the number for the credit in here is off. It should be 83,339. Because I added it up and it was off, and then I went back to the original document. So I don't know who put it together.
Okay, I will go back and talk with Cheryl and Michelle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyway, I was like going, well.
So just a quick background for our HIV case management program. This program's been around since 1990. And it really provides help for people living with HIV and AIDS to get into care and stay in care, as well as ensuring medication access. And the goal is really to decrease viral suppression. And why that's so important and critical is not only for improving lifelong health outcomes, but also to prevent further transmission of the virus in our community. So that's a little bit about the background of the Ryan White Case Management Program. And then our suicide prevention program really provides prevention, intervention, and postvention activities for our community. And this month is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And so wanted to let you all know that the team will be attending the Board of County Commissioner meeting on September 8th to provide all of you with an update. So that is all I have, unless you have any questions.
So yeah, we see these amendments kind of trickle through after the legislative session. This is the specific amounts for the specific program elements. So as I say, I've seen this before as it comes through. One of the kind of off this specific amendment discussion is I'd like to learn more, just letting you know, I'd like to learn more about kind of the relationship at that management level where some of this happens, and basically in input to the next legislative session. So it's just, me personally as sitting commissioner. So maybe we can schedule a sit down, just who talks to who and how does some of this stuff happen? As I say, because we're always on the receiving end of this, but it'd be interesting to kind of understand where the levers are going into legislative sessions in the future.
Okay, for the different program elements.
Yeah. Who negotiates with who, I guess, is my.
And just so you know, quite a few of these are really from the federal government that are passed down through OHA.
Oh, yeah, see there. That's information right there for me.
So I'd be happy to schedule something.
Yep.
But for new programs, we have a lot of discussion in the Health and Human Services Steering Committee at AOC and the CLO. What does CLO stand for?
Coalition of Local Health Officials.
The Coalition of Local Health Officials, I think, is the advocate for our public health division and other public health departments across the state, county public health departments across the state.
And I would add that I think where we have the most influences around public health modernization for legislative. And that will be really important and continues to be important as we move forward. And I will be back soon, probably with the next amendment around modernization.
Well, that kind of puts it in perspective, because I've always been engaged at that moment when the legislative session's happening. How can we be a little bit more strategic 3 months before. I guess that's kind of the thought.
I mean, at the Health and Human Services Steering Committee meeting on
Monday morning at 8.
morning at 8, we were talking about the things we're going to be pushing for in the short session.
Thank you.
And then the local government authority that I go to, like last Friday of the month, is really incredible because AOC has really tried to strengthen our relationship with different health departments. Either they're in the room or they're there on Zoom, but it's really been very worthwhile. And I think we are making some good progress with
Yeah.
strengthening.
Mhm. And anytime you want, information or questions you have going into those meetings, please do reach out. I would be happy to meet.
Well, and for bringing this up, and it sounds like you're very involved and you're very involved. I mean, that already kind of takes a little pressure off of, I was just thinking, are we being strategic at Deschutes County? It sounds like you're both following it, and I didn't have a feel for that. So
To some degree,
Yeah.
I still think that we're being more reactive than driving the legislative process at this point. I would welcome, hearing from Heather about kind of how you engage in that work. I mean, do you kind of just track Chloe and provide your priorities to them and have them do the work, or is it, how much are public health directors around the state actively engaged in legislative analysis and advocacy?
Well, so we actually have a coalition of local health official retreat next week that I'll be attending to really talk about kind of the next session, especially around modernization. And I think, so I'm actively involved, that and at the state level, the welcome working with all of you on kind of looking at different areas of the next legislative session and where we can very much advocate at the county level. But our the local coalition of health officials really is an advocacy group that takes all of our input from all of us as public health directors. We have rural, I always say, if you've seen one county health department, you've seen one county health department, rural, urban mix. So it's, I think, really important for all of us to have one strong voice within the coalition of local health officials when we come together.
So good. I mean, I'm glad I mentioned it. So you're having a retreat. Let's look for an opportunity and 6 weeks or 2 months from now for a work session just to kind of scope out what the current discussions are, because that will give us some action items now. So that could be all of us, just from what we know, and then aligning with the bigger efforts and knowing what the priorities are for Deschutes County.
Wasn't modernization, though, funded to a lesser degree than what was expected this last yes.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow there were some incredible disconnects.
Yeah, and I would say the coalition of local health officials, they advocated hard for it. And unfortunately, we did get an increase, but not to the extent that we were hoping for.
Yeah. On the behavioral health side as well, there was a whole lot of things that didn't make it to the finish line that should have. And not to get too political, but the protracted shutdown in the state Senate really had impacts.
Is there a motion?
Oh, yes.
I'll move
Having a
approval.
discussion. There's in the middle of.
I'll move approval of chair signature of document number 2023-819, an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Health Authority for funding for 4 program elements through June 30th, 2024.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Good discussion.
Very
Thank
much.
you.
Great to see these additional federal funds flowing into these important prevention and HIV work and containment projects.
Thank you.
Item number 13, City of Bend Homeless Partnership for Franklin Avenue Shelter Contract, a proposed amendment.
Hey, Papa.
Hey, thanks. Afternoon, Commissioners. Dan Emerson, Budget Manager.
Still morning, but maybe for you it's afternoon.
Yeah. There are a few nights there where
There you go.
kind of starts blending together. So Budget and Financial Planning Manager Dan Emerson. We're here today to just talk about an amendment to the City of Bend ARPA agreement. We actually gave $1.5 million to the City of Bend for homeless partnership. This is in reference to $750,000 for contract number 2023-845, which is the Franklin Avenue Homeless Shelter Partnership with Shepherd's House. And basically this is a minor amendment where they're just getting rid of the word non-congregate. After talking with Shepherd's House, it sounds like they can be more effective in their usage of space if they eliminate that word. And so they can have congregate living too, which means like friends can live with each other, not just family based. So that is what this agenda item is about. Are there any further questions or?
Did they give you any sense of how many additional people could be sheltered at this facility if we make this tweak?
I don't know. Actually, Laura was going to be covering this, but she's unable to be here today. So I can reach out and we can email you. But I think it was fairly significant. I think Shepherd's House reached out to the City of Bend and said, you know, in our practice, in our history, it's been better to have congregate in terms of effectiveness of space. So. But we can get you a specific number later.
Yeah.
And then part of the problem is that they're going to start the remodeling on the Navigation Center next month. And so their capacity is going to go down. They're like at 110 maybe at times. Anyway, so their capacity is going to go down. So some of those are going to need to go over to Franklin Avenue. And there still might be a shortfall for the program that they're providing at this time. That was I was over there on last Friday.
So is there a motion?
So I move approval of the county administrator signature of document number 2023-845 and amendment to the contract with the City of Bend to use ARPA funds for the Franklin Avenue Homeless Shelter.
Second.
So we're just removing the words non-congregate 2 times in the agreement. So any other discussion?
Well, I think it's also important to understand that congregate can look really there's a continuum of congregate. I mean, you look at what's going in at Shepherd's House in Redmond. I mean, it's going to be a lot of people in one room. In this case, I mean, we're talking about converted hotel rooms. I would picture maybe 3 people in a room, 2 or 3 people in a room, as opposed to just one in an old hotel room. So, those are different forms of congregate. And
from the information I had, it sounded like specifically like maybe like pairs of friends, right, as opposed to a huge group of folks. But we'll continue to check up on that.
Right. Yeah. So if non-congregate shelter is ideal in certain ways, just privacy and like less people influencing each other to potentially engage in problematic activity, then having 2 to a room seems like it's less of a issue than large numbers of people in a single large room.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Good discussion. Thank you. Yeah. So this is an additional item added recently, second reading, item number 14, an adoption of an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code relative to sign placed within the county road right of way.
Hi, Commissioners, Dave Doyle, County Attorney. This is the time for second reading by title only of ordinance 2023-020. As you indicated just now, that's specific to signs placed within the county road right of way. You recall there was a public hearing previously on August 30th. The board deliberated and did first reading at that time. There have been no changes to the text, and we'd ask that you proceed with the second reading by title only and then separately move adoption. And I believe the road folks are on Zoom if you need them, but I don't know that you do.
I was wondering if they were leaving you to carry their water.
I believe they're on Zoom. At least Cody, I believe, is. But I did tell him I'd be here to present this to the board.
Well, this is second reading, so we've been through this. This is 2 weeks later. Any discussion or a motion?
I think we've discussed this pretty thoroughly. I'm ready to make a motion if.
Sure.
Move second reading by title only of ordinance number 2023-020.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been motion and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. So this is second reading of ordinance number 2023-020, an ordinance amending title 10.05 right-of-way signs of the Deschutes County Code.
I'll move adoption of ordinance number 2023-020.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. This ordinance will take effect 90 days from today.
Yes, thank you very much.
And we'll go from there.
And just
Thank
to
you,
be,
Ted.
just to be real clear for folks contacted us about this specific item. Private property owners will be able to still host political signs on their property just back from the right of way. So we're not impinging on anyone's rights to express themselves in that way.
Well, and I got to share, I mean, there's some sign games that I'll kind of miss, that there's some spots where you put a sign and it's in the, right away, just a little yard sign and it'd be gone. And I used to put them in the car and just put one every night. I just put a new one up because it'd be gone. So as they say, the sign games are going away in Deschutes County.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those who know, about the change in policy,
Yeah, some people will know
suspect that
this.
this next election cycle, there's going to be plenty of people who are still trying to do things the old way.
Okay, so that was it for our published agenda. A couple other items and we're ahead of schedule a little bit. So Commissioner Dare, you'll be able to roll pretty soon.
Thank you very much.
Anybody want to start off with other items? Anything? Okay. Commissioner Dare?
I think I've said almost
Okay.
everything.
Nick, yeah,
Jen Patterson.
there we go.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. Just real quick, City of LaPine Principal Planner reached out to us to see if the commissioners would be willing to write a letter of support. They're applying for a technical assistant grant with the LCD to complete a comprehensive plan update starting in 2024. So if the commissioners are in support of a letter of support, I will draft one for your review.
Great.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I know. So this will be the first update since they've been a new city. I was there at the DLCD's meeting room in Salem when we adopted the first version of that as a commissioner, but we were community members before there was even a city there and very involved with watching the election process happen. As I say, I don't live in the city of LaPine, but very involved. So yeah, I'd be excited to be putting a letter together, just starting the process. There's also this Newberry community partnership discussion happening. So community members are coming together talking about, what's the vision for the area. It's kind of like Ben 2030's done many years ago, and they're still kind of doing that. So there's an effort to precede this process.
Do we have any sense of how large of a grant they might be seeking?
I don't have that information. I can reach out and see what they're looking for specifically.
I mean, I'm supportive, but it'd be nice to know kind of what
So
I'll get that information.
at this point, we're just saying yes to go put a letter together.
Yeah, to draft it, and then I'll put the draft before you.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Couple other things. October 16th, Simpson Avenue groundbreaking. I think that was an email we all got. The date was set, so that would be at 11:30 a.m. So just acknowledging that if we do that, we may be cutting it close to come back for 1 o'clock. Just if it, goes for a little while. So we'll acknowledge that on our schedule. Maybe 1:30 start that day, just to put some buffer in there.
That would
So
be a
that's
good idea.
Yeah, that's the 16th of October. And then, so it was also an ask, do we all want to say something or pick one of us? So Jackie Keogh was asking if we wanted to let her know. Do you want to speak, Commissioner Dare, you think? Just, it's a groundbreaking county property. Yeah, well, no, it's up to us. What
Yeah,
we want to send back
I
to
think
her.
we all say something.
Yeah, so we'll all say something real quick. So we'll let her know that too. I can do
I
that.
was watching the news about Oregon State's expansion, and they actually got the land from us, and we were never mentioned in the discussion. So,
Well, and then
We
Deschutes.
did sell it. I mean,
oh yeah, we sold it. All right.
if we had donated it, I would think that we would have gotten a little bit more recognition, but
Well, and then Ben's urban growth boundary expansion had a rezoning package internally, and this was part of that too. So that's how it got to be zoned, in the last 10 years to what it is, because it was part of the footprint of the solid waste, parcel for many years. Okay, so I will email her back. That will all three speak just real quick. Eastern Oregon Counties Association sent us an email saying it's time for dues. This is the first year that I really want to evaluate this a little closer. And Commissioner Chang, I know that, when we started doing this, you mentioned forest planning is in our rear view mirror or whatever it was, the forest plan publishing or whatever the terminology was. Yeah.
The Blue Mountain Forest Plan revision is so far out, and we should just be advocating for the Deschutes National Forest Plan revision to jump ahead in line.
What was to say? And that was my only, the camaraderie of, can't we get a forest plan done and let's, partner with our Eastern Oregon, counties and help get this thing over the line. Remember, we were all downstairs at the River House to kick that off. Were you there that
No.
day?
I think it was before it.
Yeah. So, there was momentum, and it was before COVID, but it's a shame that we do this to ourselves, big federal forest planning efforts that just get appealed to high heaven, take forever, lots of money. So once again, I kind of feel like I got stuck in that trap now by advocating. So I just let you know, I'd like to talk with our partners, the Eastern Oregon County Association, switching gears a little bit. I don't know if, do you have any thoughts, Commissioner Adair?
Well, I know that
Membership.
I know that it's 12-5. I know that we bring something to that group. So I appreciate what they're doing. I try and do their calls whenever I can. So, and I'm sure I'll be seeing some of them the next couple of days.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. So I'm glad we're talking about it.
I'd like to evaluate tangible outcomes of EOCA for Deschutes County before we spend $12,500.
And so I'm letting you know that I'm evaluating it too. So as I say, I'm not here for approval today, but Commissioner Daria, let them know that, hey, what does this look like for Deschutes County to be partners here? And I'm there with everybody, but lobbying efforts is where it ends up happening, but we already have our lobbyist efforts. And I'm not opposed to, aligning on some topics through EOCA. So just an evaluation moment.
You can look at AOC, and I can point to specific pieces of legislation that made it to the finish line because of AOC's work, and that we specific pieces of legislation that we care about. And I'd like there to be actual tangible outcomes of EOCA for us to be investing funds in it.
Well, and remember I don't know if it's obvious, but one of my thoughts is, I think of Deschutes County as the big boy on the east side of the mountains, obviously population base, but we're still, kind of blown out of the water when we do some of these legislative things with Portland Metro and, Valley interests. So that's another, kind of the political side of this is, having a coordinated effort by a bunch of rural Eastern Oregon counties. So this is the discussion.
I called up Rep. Levy and asked her to add Deschutes County to the damages, from deer and wildlife. She immediately did it. So I really appreciate, there are definitely, there are benefits to it.
Good. Well, yeah. So make some discussions as in passing
outside of the EOC. And I assume that you did outside of the EOCA, that it wasn't EOCA that asked for us to be included in that. That was your individual advocacy with Representative Reese Iverson.
So just a discussion for today. So we'll take it from there. It'll come around again.
Okay. I'll be chatting with everybody.
Yeah, great. That's good. Anything else? I had a couple items, but I think I'm done now.
Yes, one thing I would mention is that the state is preparing to release its groundwater allocation, new groundwater allocation rules early in the process. I was given the impression that because the Deschutes Basin had a groundwater mitigation program, we're the only basin in the state that has that currently, that these groundwater allocation rules would not affect would not be in effect for the Deschutes Basin. We have our own custom program. But as this process is playing out, it appears that that is not necessarily going to be the case. And so there will be a groundwater allocation rules stakeholder meeting or public input meeting at some point. Annette Liba is helping to organize that. That would be an opportunity for us to weigh in on this. The Oregon Water Resources Commission will be meeting out in Burns in a couple of weeks. That would be another opportunity for us to weigh in on this. It is particularly for the city of Redmond, these blanket generic one size fits all state rules would be problematic. So, that their goal more broadly across the state of Oregon, I think, is actually both appropriate and useful. But the way that they are writing these rules, it just doesn't fit our basin because we have systems in place, our groundwater mitigation program already to address the potential for over extraction of groundwater.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I was just reminding me, I did call Doug Riggs yesterday and he mentioned that he's focused on this because I think it must be through the Central Oregon Cities organization, COCO. So he's going to be involved. Our lobbyists, not at our direction, but other work he's doing. And I may be interested in going to Burns and just kind of being part of that. If I don't know what the schedule looks like on that.
COCO will be discussing this on Monday the 18th.
Yeah. So as I say, when I got on the phone with him, he was right. This is his topic right now.
I'm planning to at least zoom in for
that. Okay. So, and that reminds me, so yesterday I met with St. Charles leadership, Dr. Johnson and Matt Swafford, their financial administrator, just as a kind of an outreach, learning a little bit about the Medicare Advantage scenario. What I learned is that, it's a kind of federal policy level. It sounds like it's really tangible here, for anybody that's on a Medicare Advantage plan, but it's not about what's going on here. It's about, what the feds fund and what the expectation is from a provider across the whole system and how it gets implemented at St. Charles. So it was just good to hear about that and understand what they're doing and having that relationship. Which reminds me, Commissioner Dare, you mentioned in the hallway going to whatever tomorrow, the health council.
Right. Yes.
So that you want me to do that?
Right. It's I put the packet.
Yep. Okay.
For you.
Well, just so Commissioner Chang knows. So so you're going to be out of town.
Right.
Starting today. So I've offered to, go to the health council. So that'll be transferring one seat. And then COACT is also the other thing tomorrow after.
In Redmond.
So
you can have a Thursday drive around like I do.
When I did that
You
yesterday.
still have to go to Prineville and then whatever.
So I was able to go to a Ben Chamber coffee thing in the morning, go to St. Charles, and then go to Lapine for the Sun River Lapine Economic Development Board meeting. So that was good, getting everybody around the table. They were waiting for our consent agenda item today for the other parcel being sold. They're also going to come back talking about a parcel for the kind of an incubator building. It's not official incubator, but $1.5 million was sent to the city of Lapine for a building construction. So the city has money to build a building for market rental for business startups. And of course, we'll hear about a land ask. But I mean, it's the people's land for the purpose. So that's from SLED meeting yesterday. And then Historical Society Board meeting last night. If you haven't gone to see it, the mountain biking history presentation put together by the museum is kind of a big hit for the people. Just thinks about the mountain biking history from the 60s, 70s, and 80s when it really kind of became a thing, especially through our national forest, public lands around here. So they've got their presentation display on that.
Oh, Camille just sent an email for our health council, said you might want to know that the business meeting is really going to start at 2:15 tomorrow at High Desert ESD. So anyway, she thought you might want to know that.
Yeah, go
I am identified as the alternate for the Central Oregon Health Council.
Oh.
So next time
Oh.
at this
Oh.
point, I cannot make that meeting.
Okay.
But
Can you go to behavioral health on Friday?
No, this short notice, I can't make either of those.
I'm
But
sorry.
for things that I'm identified as the alternate for, I'd like to
Yeah, no,
have the
absolutely.
opportunity to consider it in the future.
So Central Oregon Health Council. So if you forward that email, then I'll have that information.
I think we already sent it. Didn't
Yeah,
I sent it to Brenda to
I don't
copy for
think-
you?
That's fine.
Oh, this email just
Yeah.
now?
Would
Oh.
it be a min-
Well, let's see, what did she do? She just sent it to me. So, okay, I told her you were coming for me. All right, I will send it on to you. I'll send it to Brenda.
So yeah, that's all I have here. Anything else? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.
Then we have executive sessions.
Okay, executive. Yep, sorry. We have executive session today. I was ready to call it a day. Executive session on the real property negotiations. Do we have another one also?
If we have time,
Okay, so
perhaps with Christy not here, maybe she's arriving. Perhaps we can start with the other one first, but we'll wait until everything's turned off.